Think about the first time you remember money being a problem, not your problem, your parents' problem. Maybe it was a specific conversation you were not supposed to hear through a wall. Maybe it was the way your mother put something back on the shelf at the grocery store and pretended she had not wanted it anyway. Maybe it was the silence in the car after your father hung up the phone. Maybe it was never a dramatic moment at all, just a general atmosphere, a weather system that lived in your house and had no name, but that you understood completely by the time you were 8 years old. You absorbed something in those years, not consciously, not as a lesson someone sat you down to teach. You absorbed it the way children absorb everything, through observation, through repetition, through the emotional texture of thousands of ordinary moments that you were not old enough to analyze, but were young enough to remember in your body. And here is what nobody told you when you became an adult and started managing your own money. That thing you absorbed is still running, right now, inside every spending decision you make. Every time you buy something you do not need to feel better. Every time you feel guilty spending money on yourself even when you can afford it. Every time you hoard cash in a savings account because spending it feels dangerous even when it is not. Every time you avoid checking your bank account because looking at the number produces a feeling that is out of proportion to what is actually there. None of those behaviors came from nowhere. They came from somewhere very specific. And understanding where they came from is the first step toward deciding whether you want to keep letting them run your financial life. My name is Sig, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, the psychology behind financial behavior, and specifically the gap between what people consciously decide about money and what their nervous system actually does when money is involved. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to understand your own financial behavior at a level that most personal finance content never reaches, and give this video a thumbs up if something in the next 20 minutes makes you stop and think about where a specific habit came from, because that recognition is worth more than any budgeting tip I could give you. Let me show you what the research actually says. Before we get into the specific patterns, I need to give you a framework that makes everything else make sense. Financial psychologists use a term called money scripts. A money script is a core belief about money that was formed in childhood and that now operates as an unconscious rule governing financial decisions. The term comes from the work of Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist whose research at Kansas State University identified for major money script categories that predict financial behavior in adults better than income, education, or financial literacy combined, better than all three combined. Here is what makes money scripts so powerful and so difficult to override with information alone. They were not formed in the rational thinking part of your brain. They were formed in the emotional, survival-oriented part of your brain during a period when your brain was still developing and when the adults around you represented your entire understanding of how the world worked. When your parents fought about money, your nervous system filed that as a threat response. When scarcity was a constant presence, your nervous system encoded money as danger. When abundance was displayed, but secretly stressful, your nervous system learned that financial comfort was performance rather than reality. These encodings happened before you had the cognitive tools to evaluate them, and they have been running in the background of every financial decision you have made since. Let me show you what this looks like into real people, because the psychology becomes visible only when you see it playing out in actual behavior. Sarah is 31 years old. She grew up in a household where money was always tight, not desperate, just consistently tight. Her parents never talked about money directly, but the tension around it was always present. There were things they could not do, things they could not have, and a general atmosphere that money was something to be worried about and carefully protected. Sarah today earns $74,000 a year, a comfortable income by any measure, and yet she cannot spend money on herself without feeling guilty. Not on necessities, on anything that feels like a luxury. A $50 pair of shoes she actually needs feels like a moral failing. A dinner out with friends produces a low-grade anxiety that lingers for days. Her savings account has $43,000 in it, earning 4.5%. She almost never touches it, not because she is saving towards something specific, because spending it feels dangerous in a way she cannot fully articulate. Michael is also 31. He grew up in a household where money came and went dramatically. His father had a good income, but the family spent freely, and there were regular cycles of abundance and then sudden scarcity. Christmas was extravagant. February was tight. The message Michael absorbed was not conscious, but it was consistent. Money comes and money goes, and when it is here, you enjoy it because it might not be here later. Michael today earns $68,000. He has $1,100 in savings. He does not understand where his paycheck goes each month, not because he is careless, because the part of his brain that handles money never learned that holding onto it was possible or safe. Both Sarah and Michael are intelligent adults who understand intellectually how money works. Both of them are being run by something that formed before they were 10 years old. Dr. Klontz's research identified for primary money scripts, and I want to walk through each one because recognizing your own pattern is the most valuable thing this video can give you. The first is money avoidance. The belief underlying this script is that money is bad, that wealthy people are corrupt, that wanting money is greedy, or that you do not deserve financial abundance. People with this script often sabotage their own earning potential unconsciously. They undercharge for their work. They avoid checking their bank account. They feel uncomfortable when their account balance is high and find reasons to spend it down. They give money away more than they can afford because holding it feels wrong. This script often develops in households where money was associated with conflict, where wealthy people were spoken about negatively, or where there was a strong cultural or religious message that financial ambition was spiritually dangerous. The second is money worship, the belief that more money will solve every problem, that happiness, security, and love are all fundamentally money problems. People with this script are never satisfied with what they have financially because the belief driving them is that the next level of income or net worth is where the relief finally arrives. They work compulsively. They sacrifice relationships for income. They reach financial goals and feel nothing because the brain immediately recalibrates to the next target. This script often develops in households where money was clearly the solution to most family tension, where things got better when there was more money and worse when there was less. Teaching the child's brain that money equals safety at a very fundamental level. The third is money status, the belief that your net worth is your self-worth, that what you own and what you appear to earn determines your value as a person. People with this script overspend on visible items. They drive cars they cannot afford. They live in apartments that stretch their budget because the address signals something important. They feel genuine shame at financial vulnerability and perform wealth even when it is not there. This script often develops in households where achievement and appearance were the primary currency of parental approval, where what you had determined how you were treated, where the family's identity was tied to financial presentation. The fourth is money vigilance, the belief that you must always be careful with money, that financial security requires constant attention and sacrifice, that spending is always somewhat dangerous. People with this script save obsessively, feel guilty spending even when it is appropriate, and often accumulate significant wealth but struggle to enjoy it because the vigilance never switches off. This script often develops in households that experienced real financial hardship, where the memory of scarcity was so formative that the nervous system never fully accepted that the scarcity was over. Here is something from the research that I think is the most important insight in this entire video, and that most personal finance content never discusses. Financial trauma and financial stress are stored in the body the same way emotional trauma is. The University of Michigan researchers studying children's spending behavior found that by age 7 most children have already formed fundamental emotional associations with money that are difficult to override with later education. 7 years old. Before most children can do basic multiplication, the feelings are already encoded. This is why information alone does not change financial behavior for most people. You can know intellectually that you should invest. You can understand compound interest. You can read every personal finance book ever written, and still find yourself doing the thing that your child childhood scripted you to do the moment real money is involved, because the behavior is not coming from your prefrontal cortex where you process information and make rational decisions. It is coming from your limbic system where survival responses and emotional memories live. And the limbic system does not respond to spreadsheets. It responds to safety signals, to evidence gathered over time that the old script no longer applies to your current reality. This is why changing financial behavior requires more than financial information. It requires understanding where the behavior came from and building new evidence that contradicts the original encoding. Let me get specific, because I think recognizing your own pattern in a concrete behavior is more useful than understanding the theory. If you grew up in a household with chronic financial scarcity, you may experience one or more of these patterns as an adult. Difficulty spending on yourself even when you can genuinely afford it. An inability to feel that you have enough no matter what is in your account. Hoarding behaviors around money, food, or other resources. Hypervigilance about prices to a degree that is out of proportion to your actual financial situation. Physical anxiety when your account balance drops below a certain threshold even when you are not actually in financial danger. If you grew up in a household where money was abundant but emotionally complicated, where wealth was used as control, where spending was used to manage emotions, or where financial instability hid behind a surface of affluence, you may experience these patterns. Using shopping as emotional regulation, the specific relief that comes from buying something when you are stressed, bored, or sad. Difficulty saving because the future feels unsafe or irrelevant. Cycling between periods of financial discipline and periods of spending that undo the progress. Feeling that money burns a hole in your account and needs to be spent before something takes it away. If you grew up in a household where money was a source of status and identity, you may experience these patterns. Overspending on visible items while undersaving for invisible security. Feeling genuine shame at any sign of financial vulnerability. Lying or omitting information about your actual financial situation to maintain an image. Making financial decisions based on what they signal to others rather than what they produce for you. The question I want you to sit with is not which category sounds like you in the abstract. Which specific behavior do you do that you cannot fully explain rationally? That is almost always where the childhood script is running. Let me come back to Sarah and Michael because I want to show you what happens when these patterns become visible rather than remaining invisible. Sarah started therapy with a financial therapist after reading an article about money scripts. Not because she was in financial crisis, because she was confused by her own behavior, $43,000 in savings, and the inability to buy herself a $50 pair of shoes without guilt. The financial therapist helped her trace the guilt back to its origin, to specific memories of her mother putting things back on the shelf, to the belief she had absorbed that wanting things for yourself was dangerous, that spending on yourself meant taking from somewhere else. That financial safety required constant vigilance and self-denial. That belief was formed when scarcity was real. It was not formed in the present, and slowly, through the work of making it visible and questioning whether it still applied, Sarah started to practice spending on herself in small amounts, not dramatically, not recklessly, but deliberately, as evidence to her nervous system that spending was not dangerous, that the scarcity that formed the belief was not her current reality. 6 months later, she booked a weekend trip she had been putting off for 4 years. She paid for it in cash. She enjoyed it without guilt. Not perfectly, but enough. The script did not disappear, but it loosened. Michael's path looked different. Understanding the cycle his childhood had encoded helped him see for the first time why his paycheck always disappeared. Not because he was careless, because his nervous system had learned that money was temporary and that enjoying it now was the only reliable option. He started automating savings the day his paycheck arrived, not as a discipline exercise, as a structural fix to a nervous system pattern. By removing the money before he could feel its presence, he removed the trigger that had always produced spending. 6 months later, he had $4,000 saved for the first time in his adult life. Same income, different structure. The structure was doing what willpower had never been able to do. Let me be practical, because recognizing a money script is valuable, but not sufficient. Here is what the research says actually changes these patterns over time. Step 1 is identification. You cannot change a pattern you cannot see. The exercise of asking, where does this behavior come from? This specific guilt, this specific anxiety, this specific compulsion, is not therapy homework. It is practical information. The origin of the pattern tells you what the pattern was originally designed to protect you from. And once you know that, you can evaluate whether the protection is still necessary. Step 2 is separating the past from the present. Most money scripts were adaptive in the environment where they formed. Hypervigilance about spending made sense when scarcity was real. Spending freely made sense when money was unpredictable and now felt better than later. Hoarding felt rational when resources were genuinely threatened. The question is not whether the script was wrong, it is whether it still applies to your current reality. Most adults who grew up in financial scarcity are no longer in financial scarcity, but their nervous system has not been shown that the situation changed. Showing it requires deliberate new experiences that contradict the old encoding. Step 3 is structural solutions rather than willpower solutions. If your pattern is spending when money is present, automation removes the money before presence triggers the pattern. If your pattern is avoidance, scheduled account reviews build tolerance for the discomfort through repeated exposure. If your pattern is status spending, deliberately choosing less visible options in low-stakes situations builds a new identity association. These structural solutions work because they change behavior without requiring you to win a battle with a nervous system that has decades of practice running the old pattern. Here is a single question I want you to actually sit with after this video. Not read and move on. Actually sit with. What is the first emotion you feel when you check your bank account? Not what you think about the number. The first feeling in your body before analysis begins. For some people it is dread. For some it is relief if the number is above a certain threshold. For some it is guilt if it is higher than expected. For some it is a specific anxiety that is not proportional to what is actually there. Whatever that first feeling is, it is almost certainly connected to something that happened before you had a bank account of your own, before you were earning money at all. It is the emotional residue of someone else's financial experience that you absorbed before you were old enough to choose what to absorb. That feeling is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you are bad with money or that you will always struggle financially. It is information, specific, valuable, actionable information about what formed your financial nervous system and what might need to be examined and updated for the person you actually are today in the financial situation you actually have. Sarah's first feeling was guilt. Michael's was a complicated mix of excitement and vague dread. What is yours? And more importantly, whose was it originally? Here is what I want you to take from this video. The spending habits you have right now are not random. They are not purely the result of conscious choices you made as a rational adult. They are the result of a script that was written in a household you did not choose, during years you did not control, by experiences you were too young to interpret, but old enough to remember in your body. That script served a purpose. It helped you navigate the emotional and financial landscape of your childhood. It was appropriate for the environment where it formed. The problem is not that it exists. The problem is that most people carry it into an adult life with completely different circumstances and never question whether it still applies. The question is not whether your childhood shaped your financial behavior. It did. The question is whether you are going to let a script written for someone else's circumstances run your financial life indefinitely, or whether you are going to make it visible. Examine it honestly and decide, deliberately, as the adult you are now, which parts of it still serve you and which parts have been running long past their usefulness. Sarah put things in her cart and does not put them back anymore, not because she is reckless, because she examined the script and decided the scarcity it was protecting against is not her current reality. Michael's automated savings account is building something for the first time, not because he became more disciplined, because he understood the pattern and built a structure that works around it instead of against it. Your script is running right now. The only question is whether you are driving or it is. Now that you understand how your childhood shaped your spending, the next question is how to build the financial foundation that replaces the old patterns with new ones. In my next video, break down why your bank account never seems to grow no matter how much you earn and the specific structural fix that changes it without requiring willpower. That video is on the screen right now. Watch it next.